In the heart of London, where politics and protest often collide, the city once again becomes a battleground of ideology. On a cool September day in 2025, the streets fill with chants, banners, and unwavering determination. The reason? A counter-protest organised by anti-fascist activists standing in direct opposition to a demonstration called by British far-right figure Tommy Robinson. Robinson, a name that has polarised British society for over a decade, announced a rally he framed as a march for freedom of expression. But for many, especially the counter-protesters gathering nearby, that slogan rings hollow, an attempt to repackage extremist rhetoric in the language of civil liberty. Placards rise above the crowd, reading messages like "No Passaran," "Refugees welcome," and "Silence is compliance." These slogans aren't new. They echo decades of struggle against fascism, from the streets of 1930s London to the digital battlegrounds of today's social media feeds. The counter-protesters are not just reacting to a single man or even a single rally. They are responding to a broader, more insidious trend, the normalisation of far-right ideology in public discourse. The tone on the streets is serious but energised. Many here see themselves as defenders, not just of marginalised communities, but of democratic principles themselves. "We can't allow hate speech to be disguised as free speech," says one protester, a student from East London. "Freedom doesn't mean freedom to incite violence or fear." This tension between rights and responsibilities, between speech and incitement, is at the heart of the modern democratic dilemma. Who gets to speak? Who decides what speech is protected and what crosses a line? And perhaps most importantly, what happens when those who once lived in the shadows of extremism begin to take centre stage? Robinson's critics argue that his rallies serve not as platforms for debate, but as catalysts for division. His supporters, meanwhile, claim they're the ones being silenced, censored by a so-called liberal elite. It's a narrative that's gained traction not just in the UK, but around the world, in the United States, in Germany, in France. The idea that traditional values are under threat, that the silent majority is finally speaking out. But the crowd that's gathered in opposition today tells a different story. Among them are union organisers, climate activists, Muslim community leaders, LGBTQ+ advocates, and elderly anti-racism campaigners who remember earlier struggles with chilling clarity. They say the far right hasn't been silenced, it's been given a megaphone, and they're here to challenge that. The mood shifts between solemn reflection and loud resistance. Drums beat steadily, chants erupt every few minutes. Police form a visible line between the two groups, their presence a reminder of the risks that can come with ideological confrontation. Yet, for the most part, the demonstration remains peaceful, emotional, yes, but orderly. Some participants carry handmade signs with images of past anti-fascist figures. Others display QR codes linking to educational resources on hate speech and media literacy. The march is not just about protest, it's also about informing, connecting, and galvanizing. Freedom of expression remains one of the most cherished and contested rights in liberal democracies. But it is not absolute. In the UK, speech that incites hatred or violence is regulated by law. And that, say today's protesters, is why Robinson's rhetoric is dangerous. He doesn't just share opinions, says one speaker through a megaphone. He spreads fear. He targets communities. That's not free speech, that's hate. But the legal debate is just one part of the conversation. The deeper concern for many is cultural. In an age of disinformation, where algorithms favour outrage and virality trumps nuance, far-right talking points can spread rapidly, even when factually incorrect or ethically repugnant. Platforms like YouTube, X, formerly Twitter, and Telegram have served as organising tools for Robinson's base. He's been banned from some only to find workarounds and new audiences elsewhere. It's a game of cat and mouse between digital moderation and ideological persistence. Back on the streets, protesters speak to journalists, record live videos, and share updates on their own channels. The counter-protest is as much about reclaiming the narrative as it is about physically opposing Robinson's event. They want the world to know that Britain's streets are not just open to voices of division, they're also home to resistance. Some may question the effectiveness of counter-protests. Do they simply give more attention to controversial figures? Do they escalate tensions? For many here, those concerns are valid, but outweighed by the cost of silence. We've seen what happens when fascists are left unchallenged, says a Holocaust survivor speaking to the crowd. History does not repeat itself, but it often rhymes. We must not ignore the echoes indeed. The lessons of history loom large. From Oswald Mosley's black shirts to the National Front of the 1970s, the UK has repeatedly confronted and resisted far-right extremism. Often, that resistance came not from institutions, but from ordinary people. Immigrants, students, trade unionists, mothers and neighbours who stood up, stood together and said no. Today feels like one of those moments. It's not the largest protest the city has seen. It may not dominate headlines for long, but it is one node in a global network of grassroots action, an assertion that freedom is not the property of those who shout the loudest, but of those who protect the rights of all. There are, of course, complexities. Some observers warn of cancel culture overreach, of a climate in which people are afraid to speak their minds. Others argue that today's counter-protesters risk becoming what they oppose, intolerant of opposing views, closed to dialogue. But the activists here push back against that framing. We're not against discussion, says a law student in the crowd. We're against hate. There's a difference, and we know it when we see it. As the protest continues, a steady rhythm develops. Chants call out, speakers step forward, and moments of quiet reflection break the noise. A father holds his daughter on his shoulders. An elderly man distributes leaflets. A group of teenagers hands out water bottles and pamphlets on anti-fascist history. The crowd is multi-generational, multiracial and unified, not by ideology, but by a shared belief that the direction of society is not inevitable. It is shaped by those who show up. In the final moments of the gathering, applause breaks out. Not for any one figure, but for collective action itself. There is no singular leader of this counter-protest, no party line, just people, ordinary and impassioned, filling the space between complacency and confrontation. As the sun begins to dip behind the grey stone facades of Westminster, the demonstration begins to disperse. Some return home. Others head to community meetings, to activist spaces, or simply to quiet corners of the city where they can reflect. The work doesn't end here, they say. It just continues in different forms. The sound of protest fades, but the questions raised remain louder than ever. What kind of speech do we protect? Who benefits from silence? And how do we ensure that freedom is never used as a weapon to deny the humanity of others? Today, anti-fascist activists answered those questions, not just with words, but with presence. On the streets of London, they drew a line, visible, vocal, and unyielding. A reminder, perhaps, that democracy is not a given. It is something we must choose again and again, even when the choice is difficult, even when the cost is high.